Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to do a review on a book, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, The Monster Manual by Gary Gygax. That's right. We're going right back in time. This is a very old book, and this is actually Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Ed Edition. It's the first ed edition. It's not the second ed edition, it's the first ed edition. So a patron and subscriber, Nacho Man, was very kind and sent me this amazing piece of history. This is a review of the Monster Manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons first ed edition with my honest opinion on the pros and cons of the book. Now, this is a thin book of original Dungeons & Dragons monsters, folklore, creatures, animals, and mythical beasts. And what I want to do is I want to actually flip through the book as I talk about this product that was made over 40 years ago. I'm going to probably wind up saying that quite a few times, but it's a very old book. It's been around a long time. I will apologize. It's going to be difficult for me to show you the pages without damaging the book. I can't put a lot of stress on this because I just don't think it will survive. So forgive me if I'm not able to show the pages clearly. I'll do my very, very best. Let's see how we go with this, shall we? The Monster Manual it was published by TSR and written by Gary Gygax. This is the first time a sort of like a tabletop role-playing game ever had a dedicated book. So it's kind of ridiculous to compare it to a publication that came later. So more modern monster manuals that have been released may look superior because they came after this. In fact, they would not exist and they would not be as good as they are without this book. And that's simply a fact. You'll find that it explains how to read the stat blocks for the monsters. It's not a lot of information, but it's enough to get the job done. There are 100 pages of monsters with about 350 plus monsters and creatures that are compatible with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Ed Edition. This book has a glue binding, and after 40 years it's finally starting to show signs of fatigue, but none of the pages have come free. I thought it was stitch bound as well, but as far as I can tell, that may not necessarily be the case. It's very hard to tell from the binding. I couldn't tell exactly if that was the case. The pages are a matte white, made from what I would say real paper. I kind of feel like modern paper is not real paper nowadays. The colour cover artwork indicates that this is a monster manual, with it featuring a dragon breathing fire and a flock of Pegasus swarming around that dragon. So I kind of like the fact that they've done that. The interior artwork, as you can see, is small black and white drawings with clean lines but no colour. I imagine that back in the time, trying to do a colour book would have been pretty expensive, maybe impossible to do, given the fact that there was probably not going to be that many people buying the book. In many cases, this is the first time some of the monsters and creatures were ever depicted, or there were very few sources of illustrations to draw from. So a lot of the creatures and monsters you see here, you'll probably find that there weren't that many illustrations back then that people could actually sort of use as a guide as to what it might look like. There is a contents page. It's a pretty basic one, but it does what it's supposed to do. And it also, would you believe it, has an index because it's designed correctly. Like any reference book, Gary understood that you need to have an index, and there is an index, and it's done correctly. More than a few of the monsters or creatures are designed from weird imported Chinese Emporium plastic toys. You'll probably be familiar with some of these. There's a large number of fantastic monsters, great monsters, let's get real, silly monsters, ridiculous monsters, and obviously modified real-world beasts. But it's all done in sort of nutty fun, if you ask me. And yes, there is a lot of dinosaurs. Many of the monsters are combinations of real animals, which Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is. Are they famous for it? Is it notorious for the fact that they would create creatures and beasts like this? I feel like it's a time that we've kind of lost a little bit in some respects. Let's get real. Not all of the monsters created this way were delightful. I do remember the spider horse, and I think we can do without the spider horse. The spider horse was not a great monster. The monster lore is very limited in this book. I had to look through here, and there isn't a lot. For a monster manual, you would kind of expect more in a modern one. But this is sort of like the first time things were sort of being put out. I mean, obviously there was a book that had monster stat blocks for Dungeons and Dragons before Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in this monster manual, but it was literally like a pamphlet. So possibly I would say the reason why you see limited lore is maybe Gary is trying to squeeze as many monsters into this book as he possibly could. Okay, I've got to be really careful here. I could hear the stretching of the pages. The monster stat blocks are small and basic, so they're not like your modern stat block, which has got a lot of complexity in them. They're very, very simple. You'll even find a lot of the special abilities for these monsters and creatures are included in the lore text. So they're actually in text form rather than as part of the stat block. Is it going to balance that way? Okay. Multiple monsters are, obviously, as you can see, squeezed onto one page probably to reduce the pages required. I would imagine that printing a book beyond 110 pages was going to be quite expensive, and so space is a big issue. Space has been used. They have been quite careful about how they have laid things out. To a certain degree, there is something in this book that I find annoying, but I'll point that out very shortly. The text is very small, and which kind of makes it very hard to read. And I have old eyes, so if you've got young eyes, it won't be an issue. But the text is very small. One of the benefits of smaller text is you can fit more into the book. But it also makes it quite a lot harder to read. And, with the fact that so many people are wearing bifocals nowadays, it can be a little bit of a pain. So you really have to sort of study, and I have to make sure I look at this book when I don't have tired eyes. It's not going to work. There's plenty of non-player characters in this book, which is really nice to see. I like the fact that they have included so many. There is a treasure by type table included in the appendix, which I'm sure I'm not sure I fully understand that table. I was looking at it and it was confusing. I thought I could understand sections of it, but not all of it. So I guess the format and layout and conventions for that table that Gary was using, I don't fully see how I would use it in my game. But that's sort of beside the point. Now, this monster book reminds me of why I love Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and it's because of the ridiculous monster concepts in the spirit of strange but funny horror adventure. Like, when you think about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, some of it was just funny, some of it strange, but also there was a horror element to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It kind of reminds me, it takes me back, and I think about the artwork that was depicted for heavy metal, music that was around heavy metal. And like heavy metal pulled from Dungeons and Dragons quite a lot. So it really takes me back to that. The outstanding monster ideas for me are obviously going to be the mythical beasts. I actually like the fact that there are so many dinosaurs. I know some people don't like the fact that there are so many dinosaurs in this book, or any monster book, frankly. And also the original monster creations, no matter how silly or ridiculous they might be, or strange, I really like the idea that they are there. One of my pet gripes, and maybe this is just a convention of books back then, but with the attempt to save on page count and squeeze as much as you possibly can in, there are far too many blank pages in the front and the back of this manual. I don't like it when they do that. Now, I know the concept is it's a dust cover, Fred. It's a dust cover. I get that. But did we really need to have it? I didn't know that we needed to have it. And so, yeah, I was a little bit annoyed by the fact that I saw so many after the fact everything is squeezed in and the text is so small. It's a no-brainer that this book is very, very cool. I mean, this is literally, it's like looking at a Model T car that went into production, mass production, and imagine if you had that in your garage, a Model T, one of the very first Model T cars. Of course, if we compare it with a Ferrari, it's not the same thing, okay? A modern Ferrari, not the same thing. But which one would you prefer to have? I'm kind of feeling like I like the idea of having the Model T, and so it's a very cool addition to the collection. And I have to say a huge thank you. Here we are. There's the index. A big thank you to Nacho Man, as I said, who is a subscriber and a patron. He sent this to me from his own collection and at his own expense. Okay, so a huge thank you to him. And that is the book. And I managed to get through there without taking out a page, which is like fortunate, I would have to say. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything other. I'm not going to say, you should get this book, or because you can't buy it. Like you could buy the PDF, but you can't just go out and just buy this book. It would be hugely expensive. It's very hard. It's rare to find. But I would definitely be using this book as a reference tool for the future on my channel. You'll see more of it. You'll definitely see a lot more advanced Dungeons and Dragons monsters showing up on the channel. But maybe not in the way that you expect, okay? Maybe not quite the way you expect. So I want to say a big thank you to Nacho Man and everybody who's been watching, and all of my patrons as well. I hope you enjoyed this, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.